On the morning of October 19th, 2001, 18-year-old Tonia Miller called 911 when her 11-week-old daughter, Alicia, had vomited and was unresponsive. At the hospital, Alicia could not breathe on her own, and doctors observed the findings associated with shaken baby syndrome. Even with the absence of any other physical injuries, police ignored Tonia's repeated denials, as well as Alicia's history of unexplained illness, and they sided with the medical consensus at the time that Alicia had been subjected to horrible abuse that resulted in death. But this is wrongful conviction.
My name is Tonia Miller, and I was incarcerated in Michigan Women's Huron Valley Correctional Facility for 18 years for a crime I didn't commit, second-degree murder.
So I want to start at the very beginning. Who are you? Where were you born? How was growing up like? Who's your family, siblings? Start at the beginning.
Yeah, so growing up, we lived in the country, and there were several of us. My father had been married and divorced a couple of times, and so I have siblings, from him from prior marriages that I have a pretty good relationship with most of them. But we grew up, not very financially secure. We struggled a lot financially, but we were like a really close family, all of the siblings.
How many of you?
My parents have 5 together,
Wow.
and then my mother had a 6th one later, but my father has 4 prior to.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. And where do you fit in the lineup of everybody?
In the middle.
In the middle somewhere.
Right in the middle. Yeah.
Wow. So what was that like?
I didn't really notice a whole lot, growing up. It was all of us. We were always at functions together and whatnot. So it was a really fun time having so many older siblings and then so many younger siblings at the time. So just always having somebody to talk to or play with. Yeah, absolutely.
So this was in Michigan.
Yes, this was in
So
Michigan.
was it like a rural area?
Yeah, country setting. Just
Country.
Way out.
And what did your
fields.
parents do for work?
My mother worked at a plastics company at the time, and then later on she started working for a manufacturing company for car parts.
Okay.
And my father worked at General Motors.
Oh, wow. Okay. Sounds pretty classic, Michigan.
Yeah. Yep.
So kind of blue collar working class family.
Mm-hmm.
What was that like? What were your memories? Do you remember your parents like being away a lot working and taking care of siblings?
My father was away a lot. And when he wasn't away, him and his siblings, they had a farm that they, worked on. And he was a brilliant engineer. He could come up with anything and make it. And it was just incredible, his mind. My mom, she didn't start working right away. She waited a few years and then she went to work. And so it was kind of difficult with both of them being gone. We'd come home from school and I would help take care of the younger siblings for the most part.
Do you have any memories of you guys all growing up? Any like good memories, or it could be bad memories?
Me and my older brother, my mom's oldest, we're 2 peas in a pod. So we were always together. So I was a little tomboy running around doing whatever my brother did. I admired him so much. And he would take something apart and I'd put it together. Or he'd want to climb a tree. I want to climb the tree. If he broke a bone that year, I broke a bone that year. It was like we literally followed suit with each other. My sister that's right underneath me was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis at 4 years old. And so she had a really difficult time growing up because, it's difficult with a child with arthritis and not knowing, how we can play with her, how we can involve her because she was so fragile.
Oh, wow.
And then my mom had a few more kids. And so she got her little beauty queen. One of my little sisters absolutely loved to dress up. So I was a tomboy and she was the one that loved to dress up. And then we had a baby brother and then another baby sister. So just...
How your older brother that you said you hung out with, what was the age difference?
2 years.
2 years.
Yeah,
Oh, so you're
he's
super close.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. What were some of your interests? Like you keep mentioning you were a tomboy. So what does that mean?
I love having my hands in the dirt. I love gardening. I loved anything that had anything to do with nature. So we were always on 4-wheelers, on horses. We were doing 4-H, raising chickens and turkeys and Cornish hens and, those kinds of things. So anything that had something to do with nature.
Amazing. So what were your mid-teen, like a couple years before this, 15, 16, what were you doing then?
My parents separated and my mom moved to a town, and that was really difficult because then I became like the live-in babysitter. I was the one making sure all the kids, had their dinner, had their baths, had their homework done and stuff while mom was working. And she had to work a lot to support all of us. So she was hardly there. We had a daycare center right next door that she became kind of like a second mom to us. So somebody always had eyes on us no matter what. At 15, I got into a relationship with somebody that was significantly older. Not significantly. He was 24 and I didn't know it. He said he was 19. So, but I ended up pregnant. And so I had a daughter at 16.
Wow.
Yes. And so we didn't stay together. It was not a very good relationship. And I ended up getting back into a relationship with a boy that I had been with before. And we had a second child, a child together, which was my second child. And so the first one only ever knew him as her father anyway. So.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So by 16, you have 2 kids.
By 18, I have 2 kids.
By 18, you have 2 kids. So what were their names?
Kayla and Alicia.
Kayla and Alicia. And the man you were in a relationship with, was this also Alicia's father?
I was in a relationship with him prior.
Okay.
But he's not my firstborn's dad.
Okay. But the second?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what was being a 16-year-old mom like? I mean, you grew up in a big family where you were used to taking care of kids. Was this something you were used to?
Pretty much, yeah. The difficult part was still going to school, still maintaining.
I was going to ask. So you were in school still?
So I stayed in school. I got a part-time job. I ended up not completing the high school scene. I went to like a night school, and so I was able to take my daughter with me. Prior to that, though, I did it was another school where they allowed me to bring my daughter. They had a daycare inside of the school, and so I did that for a year, and then they closed their doors the next year, and so I ended up finishing in night school.
Wow.
Yeah.
That takes a lot to raise 2 kids and still go to school.
Yes. Yeah.
Was their father present? Did he help with anything?
Kayla's father, not so much. Every now and again, he would give us money for diapers or something, but he was an illegal immigrant, so the child support wasn't a necessity or anything like that at the time. But Alicia's father, he stepped up and really helped. Like he got jobs here and there when he could. Teenagers, you don't always keep a job for long, but it was a struggle, and eventually we moved in with his parents because my mother was remodeling our house, and they found, some lead and stuff in the paint, and she didn't want the kids there while they were remodeling, so we moved in with Alan's parents, which was right around the corner. So we were all still right there together.
Tell me about meeting Alan. What was your relationship like?
I met him, obviously, as a young teen when we first moved to town, and I actually dated his best friend right before that, and that it went absolutely nowhere. It was not really boy crazy or anything at the time. It was just kind of this guy likes me. Hey, okay, yeah, I'll be your girlfriend kind of thing. But Alan and I got more serious, and, it didn't last originally, but then we got back together and had a baby. So
Alicia.
Yeah.
Yep. So you guys were living with his parents.
Yes.
You were going to school. Were you working? How were you guys surviving?
Yeah, we were working. I was a hostess, and I can't remember if he was a cook or if he was doing dishes at the time, but yeah.
What were your plans for the future? I mean, let's talk about getting closer to 18. So you're a teenager, finishing school. What were your plans?
I actually got a scholarship to KCC, Calhoun Community College. I wanted to go to be a pediatrician, ironically, but that unfortunately all fell through.
So you never got to go anywhere?
No. When I graduated, I had just had my second daughter, and she had a lot of health issues right from the jump. And I never wanted to leave her alone with anybody because we didn't understand what was going on with her, and I didn't want her to be in somebody else's care who also didn't understand. And I just wanted to always be there with her. So I never got the opportunity to go to college.
And then you were arrested. So
yeah.
Tell me, I mean, Alicia was a tiny baby. She was only a couple months old, 11 weeks. Yeah. Tell me about Alicia. Tell me about your pregnancy. Tell me everything about that experience.
Pregnancy wise, I was a high risk pregnancy because I had a daughter at 15 or, at 16. I was a high risk pregnancy for both of them. With Kayla, my appendix had ruptured.
Wow.
Yeah. And so that was very extreme, very high risk. And so when I had Alicia, they considered her a high risk pregnancy as well. I didn't gain very much weight. I didn't get big like a lot of people do, and so they were kind of worried about her being low birth weight. She was 6 pounds. She was small, but she wasn't preemie or anything like that. But during labor and delivery, they did lose her heartbeat at one point and had to do an internal monitor on her. So then they were very quickly trying to get her born.
Wow.
Yeah, they were making the delivery go very, very fast. And immediately everything seemed to be okay, but then after a couple of weeks at bringing her home, things just were not the same. You expect it to kind of be like your first one where you don't really have any issues or anything, and so I knew something wasn't right, but I didn't know how to communicate it or what it was exactly.
What was going on? Like, what were you noticing?
So she didn't want to eat very much. She would almost chew on the nipple as if she was teething, but she wasn't teething. So she wasn't eating a whole lot. She had an upper respiratory infection all of the time. She was behind on her shots because they weren't comfortable giving them to her when she was sick like that all of the time. Her diapers she wasn't, urinating like she was supposed to. It was just a lot of little things. And then eventually she looked like she was staring right through you. She would just go limp.
Did you take her to the doctor?
Multiple times.
And what did they say?
That I was a paranoid mom. And yeah, so when she had quit breathing, they basically told me that she was angry and learned how to hold her breath.
That's what they said.
Yeah. So they didn't take me serious at all.
Wow.
Yeah.
In retrospect, how do you feel about that?
It angers me. I did apply for Medicaid card to get a second opinion from another doctor, and unfortunately that came in the mail 2 days after she passed away. So the timing was just absolutely terrible. They're a pediatrician. This is what they do. My brother had the same pediatrician for years and absolutely loved the guy, and so that was why I took her there. All of his 2 kids went there, and they were all teenagers and they were doing great and thriving, and so I took her there. And I don't know if it was because I was a young unwed mother of 2 children on Medicaid, and so that was why they didn't take me serious, or if they just felt like I was that paranoid mom. But they put that in my file, so whenever I would call, I wouldn't even get the appointments.
Are you able to sue them now because of that? Like, that just seems like malpractice. They were telling you your baby was just holding your breath. Weeks later, she's dead.
Yeah, it's something I'm considering. The pediatrician has since passed away, but I'm pretty sure, the foundation itself probably has something I could come for. I don't know.
So at the time, you would go to the doctor. They tell you she's holding her breath. Go home. You're paranoid. And you would go home, and what would you do?
Well, it caused issues between Alan and I because, he was just like, they're the doctors. They're telling you there's nothing wrong with her. And I'm just like, you can look at her. Like, something is not right. And even his mom was like, something's just not normal with her. This isn't. Everybody around me knew that it just was not normal behavior, but we couldn't pinpoint anything. We didn't know what to call it, what it was, what to research. And being so young and, so naive, I was inclined to attempt to believe that this pediatrician knew what he was talking about, and that maybe this is just normal for babies, and my first one this didn't happen to, or it didn't happen to my siblings, or so I had no idea.
Were you still close with your parents at this time? Did they know what was going on?
I wasn't very close with my father, but my mom absolutely knew what was going on. She lived right around the corner, so it was happening while it was at her house. It continued to happen once
so people
I moved,
had seen this.
Oh yeah.
So let's go to October 19th, 2001. Mm-hmm. Tell me about that day.
So that morning, I had gotten up early. Alan's parents leave early in the morning for work. And so I was up with the baby trying to get her to eat a bottle. She absolutely refused to eat. So I just laid her back down. But, they love seeing her before they leave for work. And so she went right back to sleep. Kayla got up a little bit later and had her cereal and was watching her movie. And then eventually Alicia decided to wake up, and she was just as happy as could be, still didn't want to eat, which I thought was really, really abnormal. Alan had gone fishing. They went salmon fishing really early in the morning. And so he got up with her originally and tried to get her to eat, and she didn't want to eat. And so we laid her on the floor. We played with her for a little while, and then she was starting to get fussy. We were holding her. She was feeding. She was fine. And then she didn't want to eat anymore. So I put her in her swing. I didn't have the swing going. I just had her setting in the swing, and I went to the bathroom. The bathroom had a mirror on the outside of it, so if I turned the door just right, I could see the girls in the living room. Nobody else was home. And I seen Kayla grab the front of the swing and start trying to swing it back and forth. And so Alicia's head was kind of bouncing off the back. And I yelled at her, and it scared her. So they both started crying, and I felt terrible for making them cry. But she didn't seem like it bothered her or anything. Kayla didn't understand the concept. Like, you turn the handle and it makes it swing. So she was just trying to make it swing for her. And they actually tried to use that against me in court, trying to say that I was accusing my 2-year-old of harming my 2-month-old.
Wow.
But so eventually she decided she wanted to eat again. So I'm holding her, I'm feeding her, and she coughs, and formula is like pouring out of her eyeballs, out of her nose, out of her mouth. And so I hold her upright, and her one eye like went to the back, and like it just rolled to the back, and then she went limp. And it was so unexpected. I had almost dropped her. And so I laid her on the floor, and I called 911. And when they got there, they kind of just like looked at her. We're just staring at her, and I'm hysterical. Like, do something for her. Why are you just looking at her? And they were more worried about the dog barking at them. So I put the dog in a bedroom, and my mom heard the whole thing playing out on a CB scanner. So she came running down there, and she took Kayla for me, and I rode in the ambulance with them. They struggled to get an intubation tube into her, so it actually like punctured her esophagus a couple of times trying to get it in. They were finally able to get it in, and then we got to the hospital, and they wouldn't let me see her because she was unstable. We were there for a couple of hours. This all happened at like 9 o'clock in the morning. So they transferred her at noon to another hospital that had pediatric respiratory machines and whatnot. And so I was able to see her as they put her in. It was like a toddler car seat almost that was welded to the bed. And that's what they transported her in. But I was unable to ride with her in that ambulance because they brought it from the other hospital with a team. So there was no room for me to go with her. Thankfully, by that time, Alan had gotten the message that we were at the hospital. And when he arrived home, the back door was wide open. The dog was locked in the bedroom. My car was still there, but we weren't. He had no idea what was going on. So he made it to the hospital. We were able to drive to the other hospital. And at that point, it turned from, pediatric respiratory arrest to shaken baby.
That quick. So tell me about that. I mean, when did you first notice that they were thinking shaken baby, and they were looking at you and probably Alan at the time?
Oh, well, they came out and told us that. They came out right and told us that. So CPS immediately came, started questioning us, isolated me from everybody else, told me I wasn't going to see my 2-year-old because they removed her from my mother and put her in foster care immediately.
So I want to find out what happened to her as well. But actually, let's go there. So where did Kayla go?
So my mom had her originally, and then CPS showed up and took her from my mom and placed her in a foster care home. Thankfully, my grandfather, my mom's dad, had a foster care home. And typically she doesn't take young children, but because it was a family member, she immediately accepted her. So she was with family, thankfully.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So they tell you what?
So they tell me that it's shaken baby. Just 100%, it can't be anything else. This is what it is. But when they asked me to do, like I just did with you, and go through the entire day and tell them what happened throughout the day, they kept stopping me and leaving the room, talking to whoever and coming back in and saying, well, that couldn't have possibly happened. That couldn't have. But I'm like, I'm not giving you,
What kinds of things were they saying couldn't have possibly happened?
Well, when I was telling them that, Kayla had been shaking the swing, or that when, she quit breathing on me, they're like, oh, you must have dropped her, or you must have this, or, it was just like what I was saying was not what they wanted to hear. And so they kept making it seem like I was changing my story when I'm simply just trying to tell you what happened from the beginning to the end.
And where was Alan?
He was in a waiting room. His mom and his dad came. I'm pretty sure like one of his cousins came. Like there was a whole room full of family that was there. And originally when the doctor walked in and said it, Alan kind of went after him, like, the nerve of you, like, this didn't happen. Just
were you
very,
in
very
that waiting
angry.
room when that happened? Like,
Yeah.
you saw that?
Yeah. And then they separated us and they started questioning him and started questioning me. And it was a terrible time. It was.
Were you scared?
Absolutely. 100%. 100%.
Were the police there yet?
No, the police never talked to me at the hospital.
Wow.
They never talked to me. I was able to stay there until Alicia passed away the next day. We found out later that the intubation tube was put in incorrectly, and so it was only inflating one lung, and that her pneumonia was so severe that her lungs were actually necrotizing. So she wasn't getting oxygen for quite a while, but the pediatrician never took me serious when I kept telling him something wasn't right.
Oh my gosh, she had pneumonia.
Yes, and she got a secondary pneumonia later.
But when did you find all this out?
I didn't find out all out until I was already incarcerated and going through my appeal with the Michigan Innocence Clinic. None of that was ever brought up in court. So they let me see her, and stay with her.
After she had passed? Or?
Well, they let me stay with her until she passed. They originally wanted, to harvest her organs and stuff, but because I knew that they were trying to make it a criminal case, I denied that, because I'm like, no, we're going to need.
At 18 years old, you were smart enough to know that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Why? How?
I don't know. It's just something instinctively was like, don't let them take all the organs, because then there's nothing going to be there later. I mean, I'm sure they would have attempted to do an autopsy after the fact, but if you're trying to harvest organs, you don't have any idea if these organs are okay or not. What do you do with them if it doesn't work for that person, or if it does, like.
This is insane. You're in the hospital and your 2-month-old daughter is dying, and they're like, you did this and we're going to harvest her organs.
Well, yeah, they asked permission to, and I told them no. Yeah.
Were you able to see Alan?
Yes. So we went home, and I think it was the next day that the police came and arrested me at the house. And they took me to jail. I was in the pod like overnight, the holding tank, I guess they call it, overnight. And then they just let me go the next day with no hearing, absolutely nothing. Just let me go. And
were you charged at that point?
No, they just let me go. I guess they didn't have enough to even arraign me at the time, so they just let me go. But my daughter stayed in foster care. So it was very difficult being home and looking over and seeing a toddler bed with no toddler in it, a bassinet with no baby in it, and just to know like it's never going to be the same again. So I left. I literally walked away and left everything I owned and just walked away. So I stayed with a few friends. I stayed with my aunt for a couple of weeks. My baby brother had gotten some like back pay for something, I can't remember what, some kind of medical thing, and so he actually loaned me some of his money so that I could get an apartment by myself. It was 6 months later that they formally charged me with second-degree murder, but again they let me go on a personal recognizance bond of $100,000, but part of the bond was I couldn't be around anybody under the age of 12.
Okay.
That included my little brother and little sister and my daughter. So at that point I was no longer allowed to visit my daughter.
What was Alan doing when you left? Did he go with you?
No.
What did you say to him? Did you say anything?
I just told him I couldn't deal with it. Like it was so traumatic. Like I didn't even know what I was going to do with life. I seriously had contemplated suicide, but I couldn't follow through with that. I had Kayla, and I truly believed that I was going to be found innocent of that. And it was just the trauma and having no help, not getting any kind of help therapy wise, having no way to really truly grieve, and just knowing that your every move was being watched, every conversation I was having, anything. I'm just all over the newspapers. I didn't want to have a TV. I didn't want to see the news. I just didn't want the trauma of all of it anymore.
Was your mom trying to support you? Like, were people reaching out, but you just didn't want it?
No.
No one was reaching out?
No.
Did Alan try and comfort you?
No.
What was he doing? I'm interested in him. And so you became the suspect because you were there.
Yes.
Did they focus on him at all?
No. Not at all.
Yeah, that's wild. So you leave Alan.
Yeah.
You go off on your own.
Mm-hmm.
How long after this do they arrest you?
A year later, they decided to take me to trial. So my mom, bless her heart, went through the yellow pages trying to find an attorney who would agree to take a murder case. She found Hedinger and Hedinger out of Kalamazoo. Her and my grandmother had to go through their 401k just to get the funds to retain him. And ironically, he believed that a crime had been committed, but didn't believe that it was me that did it. So his focus was on somebody else doing it, not actually going through everything and being like, well, what happened here? There's a medical issue here. Did we explore this?
And you told him about that.
And he had told me that like his brother, I believe, that he works with had a little bit of a medical background and that he thought that he'd be able to run things past him. But I don't think he really did any of that. I never met with the guy. I hardly ever had conversations with my lawyer. So I was not prepared when I went to court.
So in that year, what are you thinking? You mentioned before that you thought you'd be found innocent. Did you still think that during that time?
I did. That whole time, all I did was work. I had like 3 jobs at one point just to stay busy because my mind, went to all the what ifs, and I couldn't survive that way. So I just kept myself as busy as possible. Eventually just going full time at a factory because I was working at like the Kmart, and I had to work in the aisle where the cigarettes and the lottery tickets were sold, because if children were coming through that aisle, it was with parents. So I couldn't like stock shelves because these children might be walking down an aisle or, whatever. And so it was really difficult to get a job where children were not going to be present, even if they were accompanied by, their adults. But it was traumatizing, especially not being able to be around my own siblings.
Did the people you were working for when you got these jobs know what was going on?
Yeah, it was all over the news. And when they hired me, I, had to tell them right away there's a possibility that I may not work for you for long. But they were willing to accept that and give me a chance at least.
Wow. I'm honestly surprised they did give you a chance.
Yeah.
Wow. So when you go to trial, tell me about trial. Was your family there? Did you feel supported? What was your attorney like?
Yeah, my family was definitely there, 100%. Everything that they could be present for, anything that they could say or do to help, they were definitely there attempting to help. My lawyer, he did what he needed to do, and with the information that he had at the time. Shaken Baby obviously you didn't find doctors back then that would agree that the theory was junk science or anything. And so he didn't really have anybody that he could call on as far as an expert in my situation.
Right.
And because of that, he kind of just focused on a timeline. Like the timing just doesn't add up, that, she was not right from this point on, and, just trying to pinpoint when it happened, and there was no crime that happened. Nobody did anything. And so at that point, I kind of felt like I'm going to prison.
He opened his statement saying that Alicia was abused.
Mm-hmm.
What were you thinking when he said that? Did you know he was going to do that?
I didn't know that's how he was going to open his statement. No. The very first day of trial, he actually walked past me. He didn't even realize it was me sitting there, because I don't typically wear my hair down. So if my hair is down, I look a lot different than I do with my hair up. And he literally said he thought that I was a sister. when he walked past me.
Wow.
That's how little interaction we had throughout that duration, that 18-month duration.
So was his strategy to blame this on someone else? And was it Alan that he was maybe going for, since he's one of the people in the house?
I believe so. And there were reasons why he wanted to direct it at Alan at the time. I guess the first day that I got put in jail, the community around us, the block that we lived on, we were all pretty close, and they were all standing together one day talking about it, and his sister had made a comment to a neighbor stating that she had seen him shake her. She says that that's not true, that on stand she said that was not true, that she'd never said that had never taken place. And so I don't know if that neighbor was just trying to put it off on somebody. I don't know the circumstances around it, but that was the reason why he felt like he had a case against Alan and not me.
At the time, were you questioning Alan?
Yeah. He went from a very, very loving father in the very beginning to absolutely wanting nothing to do with her very suddenly. And so the drastic change made me feel like maybe he did. I didn't want to believe it, and I still to this day don't believe it. But it was just, when they're saying that this is absolutely positively what happened, and I know I didn't do it, immediately my mind is like, well, he did change. Maybe he did, but I don't believe he ever would have harmed her.
Especially now that you know
yeah,
what
and
happened.
I knew him back then, and I knew that's not something that he would have done. If he felt like he couldn't handle the situation, he would have just told me to come get her. It's like, and I was hardly ever away from her unless I was in the shower or went to go get, WIC or something. And he typically would stay there with her, or a neighbor would come stay with them.
So you testified at your trial.
Mm-hmm.
What was that experience like?
It was terrifying. I had no idea what to expect.
He didn't prep you, really?
Not really, no. He did like months in advance, but not when it came close to when it was about to happen. So none of that was fresh in my mind, not knowing exactly what they're going to ask me and being prepared for it at all, no.
Typically, defense attorneys recommend you don't testify.
Mm-hmm.
Did he recommend that to you?
No.
So you were just like, this is what I do.
Mm-hmm.
Do you regret it?
I don't regret testifying, but I was so young and I didn't realize how they twist your words and make it, changing of a story if you say something just the simplest duration different than how you did before or something. But their tactic was always to ask the question in a different way, hoping that you'll get, to say it in a different way that'll implicate you, and that they caught me up doing that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Did you feel like you were getting confused, caught up? Did it feel like that at the time?
Yeah.
And you mentioned that by trial you were like, this is bad. And during trial, were you like, oh, this is really bad?
Yeah, he actually told me if the jury comes out and they refuse to look you in the eye, you're pretty much guaranteed that they're going to find you guilty. And that's exactly what happened. So my heart just dropped watching them walk out of there, and only one of them looked me in the eye. The rest of them just looked at the floor and made their way back to their seats before they handed over their verdict.
What was your reaction when the verdict came?
I immediately looked at my lawyer and was like, how do we appeal? That was all I could say. Like, my niece was in the background, and if you ever pull up the court documents, you will hear her like blood-curdling scream when they read the verdict. I'm gonna cry.
We have tissues.
Thank you.
So they immediately take you away. Did you get to see family or say bye to anybody?
No.
So you go to prison at 18.
Mm-hmm. Well, I turned 20 in the county.
You turned 20, yeah.
Yeah.
So you go to prison, but you had been in jail and prison. So you were now in the system as a teenager, now 20-year-olds. What is that experience like? Had you had encounters with law enforcement? Had you been in jail before?
Never. They arrested me the one day and let me go, and then they arrested me and formally charged me and let me go. And that was the only encounter I ever had with a police officer. And then they arrest me again because they find me guilty, and I'm in the county for 6 weeks maybe. And that whole process, like, I didn't really eat anything. I was just kind of there. I was completely defeated at that point.
Were you even able to grieve Alicia?
Not like I should have, no. I would find myself at the cemetery a lot, just, laying there with her, basically. But to actually grieve, looking back, no, I never did have that opportunity.
What were your first years in prison like?
It's a very, like, it's a huge culture shock. It takes a while for you to initially be processed in. And so they ask you a bunch of questions about, your mental health, about your past and whatnot. And this man literally looked me in my face and was like, you can't tell me that you're 20 years old with a 20-year sentence and you've never done drugs or alcohol. Like, he did not believe that.
And you had never done drugs or alcohol?
Never had an inclination to attempt anything. Still don't. So it just blew me away that, like, my attorney didn't believe in me, and now I'm sitting here and I'm telling you that I've never done this, and you're like, I don't believe you. What?
And you had doctors not believing you?
And doctors not believing me, yeah. Yeah.
I imagine feeling so small when nobody believes what you're saying.
Mm-hmm. When you first come in, they tell you, like, don't talk about your case. People will use it against you in there, and they will try, whatever they can to scare you, to harm you, that
Who
kind
tells
of thing.
you that?
It was the bailiff that was there for the intake that day. So she was like, do not. I don't know, she's not a bailiff. She was a corrections officer, but so she very quickly informed me not to. She was like, and if anybody asks you, lie to them. And it was just like the first time somebody's ever told me to actually lie about something, and that terrified me, because I'm like, I don't do good lying. Like, it's not something I can easily do. And so I just didn't talk at all. I didn't make friends for over a year, really. I'd met a couple of girls that we were all kind of in there, coming in at the same time with the same amount of time for they were all, a murder charge of sorts, but it was very, very different circumstances. And so the three of us kind of banded together and were friends for quite a while, but, things change over time.
Yeah.
So,
what were the rest of your 18 years like? Were you able to take classes or do anything like that?
yeah, I stayed incredibly busy for as long as I could. They have what's called closed custody, so it's like a level 4 facility. It's tiers in there, and so I was a level 4 because of my time. A lot of people are level 4s because of their behavior, or it's just your time. And so you have to do what they call a year and a day in that level before you can move down a level. And they don't have a level 3 for whatever reason with women's facilities, or at least the Michigan women's facility. So I moved to a level 2, but I was a level 2 until 5 years before my out date, where I could become a level 1. So it's like, it didn't matter what I did in that time frame, I was still a level 2. I didn't get in trouble. I didn't get tickets to increase it back up to a level 4. But as a level 4, you only have certain periods of the day where you can come out, and that includes going to school and, to the gym or whatever they had available at whatever recreational things they had. And I loved sports, so I immediately, whenever the opportunity arose, I was doing volleyball or playing softball or, whatever. And then I realized that I was really, really good at, like, teaching people things. So I became a tutor for one of the teachers, but she has tutors for that setting and then tutors for the next setting, which was the level 2s. And so once I became a level 2, I lost that job because, yeah. So
Sure, you have people, yeah.
Yeah, but I worked the entire time, and I worked as much as they would let me. And I took as many classes as I could, whatever I could get into. I even applied for, like, AA and NA just to be a part of something,
Yeah.
and just kind of get an understanding of what leads people to things. I just had, like, this psychology was something I was very interested in. And so when I had taken that psychology course, I'm like, I just kind of want to learn more about what makes people tick. Like, what made you, like, what led to this? Why
Right.
did this kind of thing happen? And so I did that just until, I got the certificate, and then they're like, you can't be in here anymore. And you know,
Find something else.
find something else. So whatever they would let me get into, because typically things are put in there for a specific reason. So if it's drugs and alcohol, they only want people in there who had crimes that, you know, were pertaining to that. And so it was difficult to get into anything. And the majority of the stuff is like when you're closer to leaving. So it's like they don't try to rehabilitate you while you're there until you're about to go home. So it's like people get into, you know, situations while they're there, get into behaviors that you really shouldn't be doing if you're trying to go home and do the right thing, because they're there for long durations. There's Women's Hero Valley does not have like a good time. So you do day for day in the Michigan prisons. It's called truth in sentencing. So whatever the judge gives you, it doesn't matter your behavior while you're there. You're doing every day of that time. Yeah.
Where was Kayla at this time?
She was with my grandparents for a couple of years, and then I signed my rights away from her because being gone that long, they were going to take them anyway. So I agreed to sign custody over to my step-grandmother's daughter. So she gradually was transitioned and moved to Wisconsin.
Why her?
What do you
mean? Your step grandmother's daughter? Why did
she was in foster care with my grandfather and my step grandmother, and my mom couldn't take her on at the time. You know, my siblings are all young too, and I would not, you know, request that they, you know, take on a 2-year-old. And so they were already established in life. They had 2 kids. They, you know, were great people. Like, I grew up with them. I knew them. And I would prefer for her to grow up with extended family than to go to a place where we have no idea where she is and nobody can have contact with her and that kind of thing. So it was like a no-brainer back then, but I 100% regret it now.
How come now you regret it? What would your other option have been?
Well, the other option, I don't know, you know, at the time, but they isolated her from the entire family, and she believes that her biological family wanted nothing to do with her, which is the farthest from the truth.
How do you know that?
I've been told that. So when we've had family deaths, family weddings, you know, that kind of thing, and Kayla was able to come, they would either tell my family to say that they were just cousins, like, don't tell her you're their aunt, you're their uncle, you know, that kind of thing. And whatever stories they told her made her terrified of, like, my mother and, you know, other family members. And so she just would kind of hide behind them and want absolutely nothing to do with anybody who approached her.
Did she visit you while you were in prison at all?
She wasn't allowed to.
So they never took her to see you?
No. Well, she was no longer my child in the eyes of the state.
They could have still taken her for a visit, though, right?
Mm-mm.
No?
No.
That's right. You can't be around kids.
Well, that was part of the bond. And they actually
bond.
tried to utilize that at one point during the visitation process. My mom was bringing my baby sister up to see me, and she hadn't turned 12 yet. And so the warden was trying to deny it. And I was like, that's part of a bond. The bond was revoked when I was given a prison sentence. So you can't use that against me. That was a bond while I was out. That I wasn't to violate that, but it's been revoked. Like, that's no longer part of my sentence. You know, and so I beat it, and the next warden tried to do the same thing. And so it was just, I had to keep fighting to just see my family.
Wow.
Yeah, but because Michigan, you're only allowed to see kids under the age of 18 if they're your sibling, your child, or your grandchild. If they're cousins or aunts or, you know, uncles or anything, any friends, anything like that, you can't visit with them until they turn 18.
Wow.
Yeah, so Kayla was no longer considered my daughter because she was adopted by another family. So she was never going to be able to come see me.
Did your family visit you regularly? Did you stay in touch with them?
We were a few hours away. Originally I went to Robert Scott Correctional Facility in Plymouth, and my family, you know, they're not financially secure really. So that drive and, you know, having to buy, you know, like photo tickets or, you know, a meal card or whatever to be able to sit comfortably and just chat and, you know, eat with them and whatnot. It was a lot on them. And my mom had a really hard time leaving me there. And my baby sister had a really hard time leaving me there. And so my mom kind of felt like it wasn't worth bringing her or coming when it took so long for her to recover afterward. And I understood, but so it's like, and I was told immediately, you know, the longer you do, the less you'll see them, the less you'll hear from them, the less they'll answer the phone. And that is 100% the truth. And it's just because their life continues to go on out there, and you know, ours is in here and it's slow and that's all we think about, but they're busy and they can't always answer the phone and they can't always write or come visit. And so it was a devastating blow to hear that it was the truth. I'm like, I have so many siblings. If they just come, you know, once a month, I'll have somebody come, you know, every month for a year. And it just didn't work out that way at all. So yeah.
At what point and how did you get involved with the Michigan Innocence Clinic?
So I met a man by the name of Jeremy Prey, and he's seen my picture. And he was like, your picture just stood in my mind because you were so young with such a long time. And so he said it was probably a year later, like my name kind of fell back into his mind, and he looked me up and he said he immediately believed that I didn't do that. And so he wrote to me and he asked me if I had heard of the Michigan Innocence Clinic. And I said, no, I had never heard of them. He sent me an application and I turned it in. And originally, you know, I didn't hear anything. But the Michigan Innocence Clinic got funding specifically for shaken baby cases at one point. And so I was advised to resubmit. And when I did, they accepted the application just for a review, you know, not trying to get my hopes up or anything, but just like, this is one that we're going to consider reviewing. And I believe that was like 2012, maybe. Okay. So I had already been in for 9 years when they agreed to even just look at some of the stuff. And it was several years before they agreed to take me on as a client. So it was, you know, years of talking to students. Every 6 months, I'd have to retell my story to the next set of students. And it was really hard, and it was kind of annoying because it's like, how many times do I have to tell this story and I don't even know if I'm going to be your client kind of thing. But it made it easier to talk about, and they all came in with fresh eyes, like new questions, you know, just seeing things in different lights. And it made me hopeful for the first time.
So tell me about your appeals. You started appealing with them in 2020. Mm-hmm. And what happened? When did you start getting really excited? When did you get hope? When did you think like, okay, this is going to happen. I'm going to get out of here?
I never let myself get super excited. Because I just always feel like there's another shoe that's going to drop and it's just never going to work out, because just life in general never worked out for me. So I was hopeful that it would, but I wasn't excited that it was going to. I just felt like if I got excited and I got let down, it would probably be, you know, just devastating. And if I'm hopeful, then my family's hopeful. And if they got let down again, it would tear me apart. Like, and so
even though they weren't visiting you, were you still in touch with them? Yeah. They were still part of your life.
They were still part of my life. Yeah. I sent all the kids birthday cards every year, you know, Christmas cards, Easter cards, whatever. That was one of my hobbies, was making cards. And so I stayed a part of their life as much as I could from where I was. But it wasn't until we actually went in front of a judge and I got to listen to her and hear the questions that she had. And, you know, like, she was very knowledgeable about the case and shaken baby just in general. And that was the point where I was like, okay, this might actually go somewhere. This might really be happening. And then, you know, it came the time where she was going to make a judgment on whether I could leave or not. And then she said no. And I was like devastated. Like, just, I felt defeated. Like, why would she be telling me no? And I don't remember the exact reason at the moment. I'm sure David can tell you more on that. But I was defeated at that moment. And Dave's like, just keep the faith. It wasn't a no indefinitely. It was a no until. And so I'm like, okay. And, you know, just got hopeful. And so I had a couple of really close friends that I would talk to about it. Everybody knew about it because it was all over in the law library. So every newspaper, you know, coming through, people are able to see those. They're able to check them out no matter what county it was and see what was going on in the news if they wanted to. And so mine was a very hot topic. And going up to the control center for meetings and whatnot with my attorney or on Zoom meetings with the judge and stuff, nothing is confidential. Everything can be heard. So everybody knew what was going on, even if I didn't want to talk about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when did you find out that it's over? You're going to get out. It's going to be overturned.
The judge actually told me in court that day, although they didn't know how long it was going to take for MDOC to release me. So it was like, I'm aware that I'm leaving, but I have no idea when. But I knew it wasn't going to be a long time. But it just happened to be the very next day, thankfully. But it's like, I didn't tell anybody really. I told one person, and obviously my roommate knew, and the officer in my housing unit knew. And so at some point, word got out from officer to officer, and one officer from a unit that I had lived in previously came running into the unit and calls me to the desk, and she's so excited, and she's like, "You're going home." And then everybody in the unit is like, "How are you so calm right now? We'd be blowing the roof off of this place." And so then whenever the phone would call, the entire unit would go silent, waiting to hear if that was my call. And so then when I was leaving, they were all banging on the windows and, waving their goodbyes and everything.
18 years.
18 years. Yeah. It becomes a family unit in there for the ones that you truly are close to.
Are you still close to any of them?
Yes. Yes, I am.
Are any of them out?
One of them, yes. She came home last year, so she was off parole. And it's super exciting that now we can just go do things whenever.
Amazing.
I have one, she should be released in 2026. And then I have one that I'm super, super close to that unfortunately has life without the possibility of parole. So we're working on that one too.
Are any of them innocent?
The one that's getting out in 26, I absolutely, positively, 100% believe she's innocent. The other one, I do believe there was a role played, but I don't think how they described it was her position in it.
Do you have any kind of relationship with Kayla?
None. No.
Have you tried to reach out to her?
I did. When I was officially exonerated, which was, I got out in April, and it was August 31st, I believe, that I was officially exonerated, or I got the news anyway that I was exonerated.
2021, yeah.
Yeah.
You were released April 22nd, 2021.
Yes. Yep. So it took a couple months, but they did exonerate me. And at first, I was living with my brother at the time, and he had a relationship with her somewhat throughout the years. And, he was like, he tried to reach out to her adopted mom, and she didn't respond or anything. And so he had left a message like, I just want you to know she's living with me, and, this is what's happening. And she never responded. And so he was like, just give it time. She'll reach out to you. And so I waited a little while. And then finally I was like, what if she's waiting for me? I'm waiting on her, but she might be waiting for me. So I reached out to her, and I sent her the article of the exoneration, and immediately her adopted mom messaged me like, she doesn't want anything to do with you or your biological family, and if that changes, she'll let you know. And I'm just like deflated, like.
What was that on? Facebook? How did you reach
on
out?
Messenger. I didn't want it to be on Facebook or anything. I just wanted it to be kind of a private thing. And so I sent it to her on Messenger. Just recently, a few months ago, I messaged her, and I'm like, I don't expect a response from you at all, but there are a lot of family medical issues that you should be made aware of for the future. And I just kind of started sending her little blurps of things to look out for. And she did respond and said that she wished she had known some of this previously, because she had just had her first seizure a few months before.
Wow.
And so it kind of blew me away, because like we found out later that that's what was wrong with Alicia, was she was having seizures that whole time. And obviously at 18, I thought seizures were grand mal. I didn't know there were any other type of seizure. So when she's staring right through you or going limp or, whatever, all the different things that she was doing, it was her body trying to tell us that something was wrong internally, and we didn't know. And then my sisters, their children, I don't know if every single one of them, but majority of their children have had seizures at some point. So there's very clearly a seizure disorder in our family. My sister has actually been diagnosed with one as well. So It's like, we didn't know any of that, obviously, way back then. And so she said she was being referred to a neurologist, but I haven't heard anything since.
That was last you heard from her?
Yeah. Yeah.
I can't imagine the wanting to just be like, I love you. I didn't do this to your sister.
Yeah.
Have you said that? I know you sent the article, but have you
Yeah.
said?
No, I'm trying to respect her wishes. I'm trying to put myself in her shoes. You know, she believed all those years that I really did this to her sister and that, you know, her biological family didn't want anything to do with her. And then here she is, you know, young, going through college, you know, and if anybody correlates me with her, then she's being bombarded by all these people like, hey, was that your biological mom? Or, you know, things like that. And so I'm trying to put myself in her shoes and just give her that time and that space and hope that eventually she'll understand that I loved her all of these years and I didn't do this to her little sister, and I would have been in her life if I had the opportunity, and, you know, eventually come around. But that's 100% on her. It hurts, you know, but I don't want to push her. I don't want her to hate me or to block me on social media or anything like that down the road. So we're not friends on Facebook, but she didn't block me, so there's hope.
Well, she might hear this podcast.
Yeah, she might.
You just kind of said what you would say to her. If I was going to ask, what would you say to her? Is there anything else you would want her to hear?
Just that her family really truly does love her. Everybody wants to get to know her. Everybody wants a part of her life. They were all kind of told that they couldn't be a part of her life. And so nobody abandoned her. She's never been abandoned. She's never been forgotten. We celebrate her birthday every year. You know, we talk about her all the time, and we just wish her well.
What is your life like now? What are you up to? What are you doing? Do you have future plans?
So I took some time just to really get to know all of my siblings' children, all my nieces and nephews, because they were all married and divorced and having kids and everything while I was gone. You know, I lost my father, I lost my grandparents. I have one surviving grandmother right now. And so I took a lot of time just kind of focusing on family. I worked for a very short period of time, and then I moved to Kentucky for a little while. I was engaged down there, and I just miss my family. And so him and I kind of parted ways, but we're still really, really good friends. You know, his whole life was down there and mine was up here. And so I came back. And
how did you meet someone in Kentucky?
He actually lived across the street from me. He was the one who went out fishing with Alan the morning that Alicia had collapsed.
Wow.
So he lived across the street from us. He moved, you know, later on down there. But when the Michigan Innocence Clinic was reaching out to people, asking them what they remembered, like neighbors and friends and, you know, family and stuff, they had asked him if he remembered anything. And he really didn't. Like, we didn't really have a whole lot of contact, him and I. But he was really good friends with Alan, so they were kind of hoping he would remember something. But it just kind of, he was like, oh, yeah, you know, how do I get in touch with her? And so my sister told him how to work JPay, and then he started visiting, and one thing led to another. And, you know, but
wow.
Yeah, unfortunately, I've been away from my family too long. I just want to be here with my family, and he's very supportive of that and very understanding. And although, you know, it hurts being away from him, and, you know, that the way we parted ways and whatnot, we're best friends. We're still really, really close.
I love that.
Yeah, so now I'm trying to figure out what I want to do in life, like where I'm fitting in, you know, what
lost your whole
me.
life. You were 18. I mean,
I did. So I've kind of done a few things I probably never would have done.
Like what?
Jumping out of a plane.
Oh my gosh. You went skydiving?
I went skydiving. Yeah.
How was that?
It was incredible,
wow.
to be honest. Yeah. It was, I can't even describe the freeness that you feel just doing that. But I'm terrified of water, and so I went kayaking, and, you know, just I'm around really great people that I know aren't gonna, you know, tip the boat on me or whatever, and just kind of make me feel comfortable and whatnot. So I went kayaking, I went zip lining, I, you know, jumped out of a plane. I just doing things that I probably never would have done because I'm a very like in the shell, behind the scenes kind of person, and so I'm just trying to actually get out there and really talk about things and just enjoy life a little bit.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Is there anything you want listeners to know? Anything that you can promote or they can help you with or anything like that?
I think mostly for like the upcoming lawyers, the ones that this is what they really want to do in life. Like, don't take a client on if you don't believe in them. Like, don't take it on for just the money, because if my lawyer would have believed in me and would have fought for me, I don't think I would have gone to prison. The experience after the fact has been incredible. Like, I'm meeting all kinds of people that, their stories are similar, but it's sad that I'm meeting people whose stories are similar, who've, been exonerated. It's great that they're exonerated, but it's sad that they've ever been there to begin with. But don't take on a case if you don't believe in your client. Like, tell them to go find somebody who really will believe in them. Don't be their last resort, so to speak. But just, I don't know. Don't judge a book by the cover, really. Everybody believed what was in the newspaper, and that's not who I was. That's not what happened. And even to this day, I've never gotten an apology for what happened to me at all. It's just, they just expect you to just go on with life, and it's difficult not having a credit score because I was gone for so long. Like, the credit bureau basically thought that I was deceased. I couldn't get my driver's license because I was no longer in the system. My bank account was gone because I was gone for so long. Like, there are so many things that we struggle with and that we really need help with. I don't know if there's a way to change the laws so that for people who are gone that long, obviously we're not out here driving. So to keep our driver's license, I don't know how difficult that is. They did make me go through the whole driver's training experience all over again. But for like our bank accounts, when there's no activity for so long, they just close them.
Where does the money go?
Exactly. I mean, so there's so many things that we have to deal with coming out when we've done these long sentences like this that people just, they don't realize. They just think, you're free and you're happy. And it's, no, we have to fight to get our old life back. Like, we can't go get a car. I had to have a cosigner to get a vehicle. I can't just go get housing because I don't have any kind of history to show them, any kind of work history or anything. I have to have a cosigner. It's just, just because you're exonerated doesn't mean everything just goes away and works out for you.
I'm really glad you said that. Thank you. Because I think a lot of people don't know that.
Yeah. I didn't tell you before, but I was able to get 4 associate's degrees while I was incarcerated. I was able to take classes where I was able to learn skills, to communicate, to express my feelings, to really feel like I had a voice, because my entire life I felt like my voice didn't matter. It was never allowed to take place. And so now I have this voice, and you're not going to be able to shut me up.
Perfect.